Well, I'll kick it off. My name is Dave Ashheim, and I've got two great co-hosts. David, I'll let you introduce yourself if you want to.
Certainly. I'm David Nuttall. I have a company called Arty Maps, and I also have a consultant for Lowe Mill ARTS Entertainment, and I'm in Huntsville, Alabama.
Beautiful.
And I am Anna Busby. I work here at Engage Buy Sell as a project manager, primarily with mapping clients. And I am in Nashville, Tennessee.
And if any of you end up signing up to work with us, you will work closely with Anna. And she's been super helpful in setting all these maps up. All right. We're going to speak mostly about the mapping system, but I thought I would just give you a little frame of reference. I started this company, Engage Buy Sell, about 15 years ago. The Smithsonian Art Museum, some of the folks are on the call, they were, I think, my first or second client 15 years ago. And we've just got a whole suite of engagement services, from audio tours to smartphone tours, text messaging scavenger hunts, and digital membership cards, and a whole bunch of things that service the cultural community, mostly in North America, but some around the world. And the next slide. And we were faced with many of our venues, both indoor venues and outdoor places like the Cincinnati Nature Center, Naples Botanical Garden, and others came to us and said, we have this major problem. Can Engage Buy Sell help us? And so I thought I would just share with you why in the world did we start this service called GPS Mapper. And then I'm going to turn it over to Anna and David, and we're all going to take out our phones and scan QR codes, and we'll really dive into how this works. But the problem that we were asked to solve is I've got people walking around my hospital, my college campus, Smithsonian American Art, or Cedarhurst, or one of these places, and maybe paper maps are around, but maybe not. But even if there's a paper map, I'm not really sure how to navigate that. And I hate feeling lost. I think probably most of you feel as though when you go to a venue, a museum, you feel pretty comfortable just walking around. But after a while, you keep thinking, I think I'm missing something. And that's really the second bullet here. And so Cincinnati Nature and several others came to us and said, we've got these trails over here, or on the third floor, and David's going to talk about this. On the third, most people don't even know that we have a third floor. How do we show people that we've got all of these things without handing out a million maps? And if we can't do that, they're not going to have high engagement. They're not going to know that we've got these great gardens, or these great trees, or these great exhibits, or how to get to the place on the college campus. And so it's just frustrating for our clients and for the visitors. And so we started to think about how in the world could we solve this? And the next slide kind of shows how our logic went. So of course, and maybe in the chat window, you could all let me know how many of you have maps, printed maps. So go ahead, everybody, take out your cursor here and let us know how many of you hand out maps. I think some of you probably have just discontinued maps. And then many of you have said, well, let's just keep adding signs, but I'm going to guess most of you hate extra signs, and David will talk about that too. Then maybe you were working on digital copies or a downloadable app. And we went down that path too with downloadable apps. Brandy says we discontinued maps. That's interesting. Yeah, David has too. So then we, Anna and I and our engineers 2 or 3 years ago, we built a lot of downloadable apps, but they can get expensive. They can get to be 25, 50,000 bucks. Making changes isn't so easy. So many of our clients said, well, why can't you just marry Google's great mapping service, this blue dot, and I'll give you my map. So, here's my map. Put my map on top of Google and let me put little push pins all over that our visitors can tap to see interesting things about that room, that exhibit, or whatever it happens to be. So that's really what we built. And it took us about a year. We did this during COVID. to create this. And there are very few companies in the country, I think, that do this. I'll also mention we've released a geofencing service. Anna's going to talk about that later on. That's kind of interesting too. So let's go to the next slide. Some of the clients we've worked with over the last 15 years, from Wyndham to the Detroit Institute of Arts to one of our newer clients is Austin Park and Rec. Polk County has hundreds of interesting things around the county, but don't really know what these things are. So a lot of varied clients, indoor venues and outside. This is just a little sample. Cincinnati Nature, they were one of our first clients, and everybody probably has heard of Missouri Botanical Garden in St. Louis. Lone Star College came to us and said, we don't have a giant campus, but it's really hard to go from parking lot C in the bottom left, navigate your way around to go to the administration building. So they have found our services to be just so darn helpful. And Salem, Massachusetts, and one of our latest clients, a huge resort in Orlando. Okay. I will, turn it over to Anna and David.
Yeah, so the use case we're going to talk about today is Lowe Mill ARTS Entertainment in Huntsville, Alabama. So David, can you tell us a little bit about the facility?
Certainly. So you can see a picture there on the left, which actually is one of our concerts. So it's an arts and entertainment. So there's 157 working studios, and working studios means you have to be able to see the person doing their work. So all studios have a window to a corridor. All studios have an open door policy. So if someone's in there working as an artist, the public can go in on Wednesdays through Saturdays to ask them questions. So that's what it is now. It's a cotton mill. It's actually two cotton mills that were built 1900 to 1903. And we can now claim to be the largest privately owned arts facility in the country, because there was one in New Hampshire that has been sold to a non-profit. So technically it's still bigger, but it's not privately owned. And privately owned is a big deal because a family bought this building. It was originally a cotton mill, then it was a shoe factory. In fact, most of the combat boots for Vietnam were made in this factory. And then it became an appliance warehouse. And then it was sold to our current owner, who had visited the torpedo factory in Alexandria near DC and thought, we can do that. And then we did it bigger and considerably better, in my opinion. The non-profit aspect is often questioned. Why isn't this non-profit? And part of the philosophy of the owners are, everyone is a small business. Artists are small businesses. We shouldn't assume they can't make a profit. So being a for-profit entity is a little different model than most places, but it is a very big philosophical choice. So concerts, music venues, we have a foundry, popsicle place, gourmet chocolates, 3 restaurants, a coffee shop, sculptures, painters, map artists, you name it.
Yeah.
Think of an art form, it's probably in this building.
And on that note, I thought this was fairly interesting. Outside of the Lowe Mill map project, your whole life is maps. You are Artie Maps. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Certainly. Artie Maps is an entity I formed in 2006 as an LLC. But I've been drawing maps since I was 5. And I've been drawing fictional maps since I was 5. So that's why that line, hand-drawn, plausible, fictitious maps. I take the plausible very seriously. So my artwork are maps of places that don't exist, but could. So an equivalency to a historical novel. A lot of research goes into them so that I'm drawing something that could be real. I draw paper to start with, and then I evolved onto some boards and then wood. I use the grain of the wood as contours. And more recently, I draw on skin. So I do temporary art directly on the body, using the terrain of the body as the base geography. And I'm now getting into public art, so much larger sculpture that's in public spaces. So that's my art form. My consulting business is 911 public safety mapping. So I work with customers to get their GIS data in the right format and conformed to be able to work in a dispatch system and then produce a map that is used 24/7 and has to be instantly displayed. You can't wait for a server to display stuff. So it's anytime you call 911, they're using a map that is not Google. Google doesn't have fire hydrants as an example of why can't you use Google. And then the third part of that is they do consult for Lowe Mill. I help them with design of the building and layout of things. And apparently I'm extremely spatial, so I'm a useful person to figure out how things should be.
Yeah. And the art is awesome. I encourage you guys to check it out after the fact. We'll send out some links to Artie Maps. So this was a bit of a different use case for us. Obviously, the maps we talked about before were kind of several buildings in a large campus. This is a large building, but it's one building. It's several floors. It's 157 entities, so to speak. So what were the big challenges that you were looking to solve when we first spoke? I think it was a year and a half ago now.
Mhm.
Yeah, the biggest thing is there's two parts to getting lost in an arts facility. One is good. You've got lost, which means you might find things you weren't expecting to find. And the director likes that, as people can explore by wandering. But conversely, if you're having a class and you're in a space and your class starts at 10 and people get to the building at 5 to 10 thinking they've got plenty of time and spend 30 minutes finding you, you get annoyed. People also didn't know where the types of things in the building were they wanted to see. So if you're interested in a glassmaker or a potter, it was very hard to go into the building and look at the map and figure out, okay, who's where and where do I go? And two other parts. One was someone would come in your studio and most of the time they would ask you a question about something else. Where's the coffee shop? Where's the nearest toilets? Where's something else? So they weren't engaging with the artists on their stuff, they were just lost. And the third part is just helping them find that the building is more than they think it is. We have 20 different doors into the building. So depending which door you come in, you have a very different experience. It could be a massive open space, or it could be a small, narrow corridor, and you don't get a sense of the scale. So having something they can look at and easily get a sense of how big this thing is, and how fun it should be to go look around.
Yeah. And in those 157 entities, there's artists and local vendors, is that right?
You have it's actually a jury process to get in. So you're either juried in as an artist or what we call an independent business. So the independent business is still creative. So we have an architect, and we have a vinyl record store, we have the food and culinary arts. And so we have a mix of a couple of non-profits. We have a dog training place, we have a cat lounge. So if there's, the only thing we don't have is monumental size sculpture. I mean, we have a foundry, but we don't have anyone doing something that's scale absolutely massive. But yeah, if most people are absolutely shocked and amazed that something like this is in Huntsville, Alabama.
Yeah.
They think, why isn't this in Miami or New York, which doesn't have anything comparable in size?
Yeah. So when we talk about the two kind of pieces of technology or solutions that you're using, it's a smartphone tour or a mobile web app and a GPS map. So we'll have a QR code up in a second so you guys can check out the actual site. But what we've been talking about so far is this GPS mapper. So we use Blue Dot technology so the user can actually see their location, and it does not require download. So Dave touched on this, where how we thought about building apps that a user would have to end up downloading. There's kind of a big barrier with that. And David, that was a big thing you were trying to avoid. So can you sort of speak to, you know, how Engage by Cell was the solution that you selected?
Certainly. Before I saw your talk at NACIS a couple of years ago, we had already started the conversation of how do we improve signage, wayfaring, and navigation within the building. And we'd had a couple of people present building an app from scratch. And the conversations with the building owner and executive director were, well, that sounds good, but then you've got to pay to maintain it. It's one person's domain knowledge. How do you update that in-house versus asking for an update? And also the demographics of the people that come into the building. A lot of art buyers tend to be people who maybe have retired and have a disposable income, and they may not be as app savvy as others. And do people really use an app for a building when they're not at that building? How many apps do people really use that are on their phone? I am a bit reticent to keeping an app on my phone because I don't want it to drain my battery or use my data when I don't need it. So I keep my Delta app on my phone, but if I'm somewhere local, I'm probably going to delete it after I use it. And we
Yeah.
didn't want that to be the case. We didn't want someone to forget about the building. And with this being a URL, they can still look at it outside of the building. And I guess we'll come to the open close part in a minute.
Yeah. And you also utilize, I'll go ahead and pop up the QR code actually, so people can, if you get out your phones and open your camera and scan this, you will actually go to the overall smartphone tour for Lowe Mill. And you utilize the app to take visitors to the website, and you utilize the website to take visitors to the app. Is that right?
Absolutely. And one of the questions that gets asked a lot is about the history of the building, because it's a gorgeous old brick building with 16-foot ceilings and massive windows, and people are, what was this? When was this built? So within the tour, they can go to the history page, and then there's a comprehensive history of the building and the owners and the uses of it. So we like that to be, you're here, why don't you find out a bit more? And also there's a calendar of events. So you're here, there's a theatre, the small black box theatre on site. So what's happening at it? So you can look to see that merging of kind of the static data on the website plus the dynamic data of where you are in the building. It works really well.
Yeah. So if you are on this main menu, which you're brought to once you scan this QR code and you click maps, you'll get a little pop-up here that asks you to allow location services. I'm guessing no one on the call is in Huntsville, Alabama, so I would say don't allow. Otherwise it'll pull you off the map. But if you were there, that little blue dot that shows up would follow you around, and you can see immediately all of the studio numbers, and some of them are pink. David, what does it mean if a number is pink?
If it's pink, it means the studio is open currently. So the building is open to the public Wednesday through Saturday, 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. But the artists can come and go during those times. They have to spend at least 15 hours in their studio. So they have to be open at times. But one of our frustrations when people would come to the building and think, well, was it worth me walking up to the third floor if there's no one open? So if you click on floor 3 on your phone, you will see that Studio 308 is bright pink. And hot pink was the chosen color from our director. And if you click on that, it will then tell you about the studio and gives you links back to the website again. So you can see one, that it's open, 2, who's in it, 3, what type of artist they are. So I share my studio with my wife. So see, it says painting and drawing, and then you can get a link to go get more information about them. And something that Engaged by Sale has recently done for us is given us the ability to, each artist can switch that on and off. They can say, I'm open now and I'm closed. And they all close automatically of an evening, so no one can just log in once and stay logged on. So that's a nice thing. But we now have the option to set standard hours for some of the businesses. So we have restaurants that have published hours, and it was annoying for them to have to go every morning and remember to click that they're open, and every evening. So we now have those. So some of the ones that are bright pink are restaurants because they're taking advantage of that new functionality.
Yeah, I thought that use case was so interesting because normally when you have a map, the facility is all open at the same time. This is very different than that. And obviously it's midday on a Thursday, but weekends, this is a lot pinker, would you say?
Yes. And there's Saturday afternoons are the busiest time by far. And then once about every 6 weeks, we have an open studio night. The last one was last Saturday. So from 5 to 7, every studio is required to be open. So we have a published time where someone comes in and says, I wish I could have seen that, but they weren't open. We can all say, hey, but on this date, they will be. And you can contact the individual artists and find out when they'll be there. Most of us, well, it's probably about 50%. 50% of the artists, this is their full-time work. And the other 50%, they have other jobs as well, like I do. So some people can be there and meet you randomly, and other people have set hours because they have to work around, that other annoying work they have to do.
Yeah. And we got a question from Brandy saying, is this done from a blueprint of the building overlaying on Google Maps? In very simple terms, kind of. So there's a lot of other aspects that'll go into it. David, you're nodding. You look like you wanted to add to that.
Well, no, I think simplistically, yes. We do publish paper maps that go around the building. So I do manage those maps. And one of the things that I wanted to add to that is the map isn't static in the background. We move walls occasionally. Someone rents 2 studios and merges them together, or we split studios. So I have to edit the background. Fairly recently, I had to add 2 new studios because we created spaces that didn't have studios in them. So they had to be put on the map. So yes, it is basically a CAD drawing that I have then output a simplified format to use. And I say simplified, I've taken all the labels off the static map that's printed so that all of the studio numbers are markers within Engage by Cell technology.
Yeah. Yeah. If Google Maps had every studio laid out for you, that would be great. But most of the time, facilities on Google Maps are not up to date, or maybe just not showing, I don't know, up to 80% of what they actually have to offer. So we kind of
you can see the restrooms are dominant in the map if you're looking at the map, and the stairwells are bright color and the elevators are bright color. So the key things that people need to find: public space versus private space, how to move between floors, and where the restrooms are.
Yeah.
Anna, would you say that half of our clients give us their map, like Missouri and others, and then the other half, like Polk County, or we're kind of using layers of Google? And maybe you could even explain that whole concept that Google has many different kind of
Yeah,
versions.
so oftentimes, and most people on this call probably have an existing map that they have that is on brochures or on signage or something like that. Well, that map oftentimes needs to be manipulated to fit the scale of Google, to be to scale, and to make the blue dot technology actually work. Because if you're using a map that was, you know, drawn up by an artist that is not plausible, like David's, then it wouldn't overlay on Google Maps correctly. So oftentimes what we'll do is take the existing map a client may have and manipulate it to fit, so we can kind of keep their branding. Or there's an option to put a skin, is kind of what we call it, over Google Maps, where you can hide all the markers and basically change the color of roads, backgrounds, water to match branding for clients. We've done both of those things. So a big question we also get from clients is, okay, we built this lovely map. Now we want people to use it. And QR codes are a big hot topic after COVID. Everyone kind of is familiar with how to use them. When you launched, David, how many QR codes do you have in your building? What's kind of the strategy you guys use to get people to use the app?
Sure. Then the app was kind of part of an overall wayfaring change. So the images you see on the slide deck, those directional signs at the top, restrooms, elevator, studios, none of those were there when we started this project. There was some signage around the building, but it wasn't coordinated. It certainly wasn't color coordinated. So we now have, you can see in the lower one, the directory, got a yellow, a green, and a red. So the 3-story building is green, the 2-story building is yellow, the 1-story building is red. So we have the background to the QR code matching those. So there are 26 locations around the building with physical maps that are mounted on the wall, and they all have a QR code and our hashtag and our Instagram. And then there are other directional signs that are at every corner, and each of those have a QR code as well. So basically you can see a QR code almost as soon as you come into the building, and you can see it anywhere. You can change direction on a hallway inside the building as well. And Heather had a question I'd like to answer from the chat while I was there. This was actually a question I asked Anna a couple of weeks ago. Can we add like a headshot of the artist at the top of the pop-up? And the answer was, we can put it at the bottom, but we can't put it next to, and they've just changed that, so we can. So yes, you can put a photo in that, and you can have, I believe you can have audio and video links directly in that pop-up.
Yeah. and buttons. And even if you wanted to have a survey, we have some clients that at the end of a tour, if it's linear, at the end, they'll say, take a survey and tell us, you know, what you thought, if there's anything that we could improve on, things like that. So there's opportunity for engagement as well. So we touched on this, how this is a living, breathing tool, especially for you. Studios move around. Map markers may need to move around. What are some things that you plan to build on this map, or some goals you may have for the future?
Well, Heather's point is one of them. Having an ability to instantly recognize where you are, but also who you're with. So having a photo of the artist on their pop-up is going to be good. During the open studio night, we have an internal Facebook group for all the tenants, and one of the common threads was, hey guys, you get asked this question. So it's the artists helping each other. It's very collaborative. One of the most common questions public come in and they ask is, did you do all this, or are you the artist? And it's not a rude question. It's often they're not familiar with a working studio. They're used to a gallery where the person there is selling the art, they didn't create it. Or they're not used to walking into someone's physical working space and being able to interrupt them. So they feel like it's a safe question as a lead-in. Having a photo of the artist in this would help that. It's like, oh yeah, that's the person I'm going to go see. Now I don't have to walk in and feel awkward. So kind of adding things to this that help the public feel more comfortable and don't feel like they're disturbing. So it's very much trying to get the public to talk about the art in the space versus talking about something else. And so that's really good at helping them with the visibility. The other part we'd really like to do, and we talked about this in the past, like on paper maps, how do you get to certain things? Like we have 7 galleries in the building that rotate art. So how do you find those? Well, how do you find the theatre if that's all you care about? So we're thinking about, we don't have a main entrance. At the nearest thing to a main entrance, having a much larger screen and being able to do a snail trail. So you are here, you click on the studio and it shows you how to walk there. And it will say you can walk up 3 flights of stairs, or you can go to the elevator. So we want it to be accessible route or walking route. So I think that's one of the things that would probably keep people happy that are visiting, and the tenants who like, people can't find me. It's like, well, if you tell them to go here, they're guaranteed to find you from there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know I've got to build every studio having a little line I draw to them manually.
Mhm.
So when you ask about what I've got to do, yeah, the back end is some maintenance, particularly as we are transient in terms of people brilliantly upgrade their studios. They outgrow the space and they get on the waiting list for a bigger space. So they've moved within the building. And so it's great to see businesses expand, but that means, yes, you have to keep up with the back end of this.
Yeah. Dave, did you want to speak a little bit more on some other use cases we've got?
Yeah, maybe stop sharing for a second. That one question from Heather and Brandy made me think folks may enjoy just seeing a couple of pop-ups. I'll show you can you see my screen, Anna?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Cincinnati Nature, but if you're walking around, there is a legend over on the left side. So you could pick things that are in bloom, or artists that are there, or trails. You can pick these things. And then when you tap the little pop-ups, like Anna had mentioned in the chat, there could be a little video built into the pop-up, or pictures or text or links. So all kinds of little things you can build contextually. I think that's why this is so, I'll give it back to you, Anna, why this map is so interesting, because it's following you around using the blue dot, and I see something interesting and I can tap it and up it pops. So the types of use cases that we've been seeing range from really interesting indoor venues like David's to hospitals and colleges, some factories, some big corporate facilities, and then even some malls and shopping centers that are a little confusing have been coming to us saying, wow, this could be really a fascinating way to kind of contextualize what I want people to be able to look at.
So if you guys have any lingering questions, you can just put them in the chat here and send them to everyone, and we'll give you guys a few minutes to see if we have any questions coming in.
And while that's coming in, do you want to share your view, or I can share mine with the search list that we've implemented for Lowe Mill, because that gives a different view to look at.
That's cool.
Yeah. If you have it up, I'll let you go ahead.
David.
Let's see if I can share my screen. I don't see an option to share my screen.
Really? Okay, maybe.
Oh, yeah, I do. It was behind my camera. Okay, you see my screen?
Coming.
Yes, there it is.
Yeah.
Okay. So from the map, I can see things, but if I know I'm looking for someone in particular or a name thing in particular, I can go to the search list, and now I can see both who's open and the name of the artist and the name of the business. So this is in numerical order, but if I say, okay, I want to go to Pizel's, it then zooms to Pizel's, shows where it is, and gives me that contextual link there. Because one of the things that you have a limit of on a map, you can zoom in so far, but there's no way I could put everyone's information on this. You can't say that this is a restaurant with all this information. So we've decided to give people multiple ways of finding. It's like, oh, okay, I want to go find Piper and Leaf. Where are you? Okay, you're here, and here's the link to them. So that was just a really nice way, and it was I'm going to say it was accidental. I didn't realize the markers in here would turn hot pink as well. So that was like, oh, we built this out, and it was a bonus because now you can scroll and see who's open on all 3 floors at once. And one of the things that Engage by Yourself changed for us was when you click on that, it automatically switches which floor you're looking at. So you don't have to then try and cut down the number of buttons people have to pick. Yep, I know I want to go there. Show me, and then you can go look at it.
I see a question Deborah asked about data security. Deborah, there's a couple of ways to answer that. One is the users have no access to any of the back end. They don't even know anything about Engage by Yourself. So it would be very hard for a user to somehow get into this system. From an admin point of view, you can set up the admin users in your facility. And David, maybe you're the only one possibly for your venue, or maybe there's a backup.
I think we split it up into different categories. So I manage the maps and someone else manages the calendar and the other sides. But yes, I think we have 4 admins.
And Deborah, you can set up what rights a person has. So David might be a super user, but I might only be able to look at reports. And then from our infrastructure, we are a company that's a SaaS-based, cloud-based. We have everything hosted in our network operating center in Fremont, California, where we have 50 servers. It's in the kind of building that it takes the eye scan and the thumb scan to get in. So our servers are in the same place that all of the other major Mountain View, California, Sunnyvale SaaS companies are located. And then we back up everything on Amazon's cloud. So should data security be something you'd like to know more about, we've got the papers that we can send to you that talk about that, but everything is super secure.
And I'm just going to toss up, this is a QR code that'll take you to several client maps, including Lowe Mill, if you wanted to reference this at any other point in time. You can just scan that QR code and it'll take you directly to a site with a list of names to explore.
And yes, Heather, I'm doing the editing for this map, and it's most of the time it's very simple and intuitive once you've kind of figured out the layout. Mine is more complicated because with 157 studios plus restrooms and a few other facilities, that is a lot of markers to manage. So I just run out of screen space when I'm trying to manage it. So the tip I would give for that is think about it in advance. So I've ordered them numerically by floor instead of alphabetically or something else. So making the back end easy to manage, you can do it. A little bit of planning helps.
Yeah, and that's another piece of what clients have come to us with is ownership of the data that they're putting out there. A lot of times if you employ someone to build an app, if you want to make a change to a marker, you got to email that person the change you want to make, and then they have to make it whenever they have time, and then you check it out. And if you have any changes, it's a back and forth. But yeah, you have full access to all of your information in your dashboard, and the second you edit things, it's live. It's on that QR code. It's on that map. And I've tossed up all of our information here. If you want to shoot any of us an email, we'll follow up with a recording of the session today and some additional information on David, Artie Maps, Engage by Cell, all that good stuff. And thank you guys so much for joining, and thank you, David, for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you, David. Yep. And if anybody wants more information, David's available. Ann and I are available. If anybody wants a demo, anybody wants to just try it, just let us know. We just are just so bullish about this because it's just solved so many problems. So be glad to help you.
If I'm going to throw one little pitch in, I've definitely felt like Engage by Cell has been responsive and treated it more like a partnership. So if I've had questions, Anna's probably not going to like it, but she's been really good and very responsive. I mean, it's like responsive within the day of, oh, I don't know about that, let me find out. And then that response is pretty quick as well. Because we've definitely challenged you to say, how do we do this? Can you do this? And a couple have been, no, we can't do that for X reasons, but most have been, well, what if we do this? And most of those, I mean, that's covered. We're not paying extra for that interaction. So I think that's a really good thing to point out.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, David.
Yeah, you're an awesome partner to have. I mean, you know a lot about maps, more than me. So a good person to learn from. All right, thanks everyone.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye.